As the Ukraine war rages on, what's Trump's endgame? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy are having a falling out. Figuratively, with Russia involved, anytime you mention falling out, you need to clarify it's not out a window. Things have taken a dark anti-Ukraine turn. Trump is seemingly blaming Ukraine for its war against Russia, and calling Zelenskyy a dictator without elections, after Zelenskyy said Trump was in a web of disinformation. Probably didn't help that Zelenskyy rejected Trump's $500 billion rare earth minerals deal as a way of paying back the U.S. Move over, Kendrick and Drake. Trump and Zelenskyy is the hot new beef of the season. And since this is Trump, I assume that beef is a Big Mac. To make matters worse, U.S. officials under Trump reportedly objected to labeling Russia as the aggressor in a G7 draft statement on the invasion. All of this can only mean one thing. Trump really was Putin's puppet all along. The P-tape is real. They say it's obvious that Trump is siding with the aggressor and blaming the victim. As the New York Times puts it, Trump has signaled that he's willing to abandon America's allies to make common cause with Putin. Putin, in his eyes, is someone worthy of admiration and respect, unlike the leaders of traditional U.S. allies, like Germany, Canada, or France, for whom he exhibits scorn. Yeah, what has Germany ever done to us? Except those 2 times. Trump has even been surprising some of his supporters. Political commentator and Trump supporter Mark Levin said MAGA doesn't support Putin. So if that's the only message you're hearing, you might be surprised by this.
Russia attacked. They got attacked by somebody that's much bigger and much stronger. Russia attacked, but they shouldn't have let them attack, because they wouldn't have attacked if you had people that knew what they were doing.
So what is it? Does Donald Trump think Ukraine is to blame, Russia? Well, Trump knows Russia invaded. He made it a talking point during his 2024 presidential campaign, saying Putin invaded other countries under previous administrations, but not Trump's. He even brought it up again during a recent interview with Fox News' Brian Kilmeade.
Russia did not attack during my administration.
Essentially, he's saying Putin is like one of those ghosts from Super Mario, and he won't attack as long as Trump keeps an eye on him. It was also Trump back in 2018 who warned Europe to not depend on Russian energy. And he certainly hasn't made Putin happy in the past. It was Trump who gave the go-ahead for U.S. Special Forces to attack Russia's Wagner Group mercenaries in Syria, ending in many Russian casualties. He also touted the necessity of Greenland specifically to counter Russian and Chinese influence expanding in the Arctic. So that doesn't sound like Trump is a Putin puppet, and if the P-tape is real, clearly Trump does not care. So what's going on? Why did Trump blame Ukraine for starting the war and call Zelenskyy a dictator? Well, first of all, nuance, my friend, nuance. Trump didn't explicitly say Ukraine started the war. The mainstream media jumped to that conclusion because why miss out on the opportunity to make Trump look bad while getting a bunch of clicks and making your unquenchable advertisers happy? Can't imagine why we always get demonetized. Here's what Trump actually said.
And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
Considering how similar this is to another famous instance of Trump being taken out of context, I'm surprised the media isn't saying Trump claimed there were very fine people on both sides. With context, when Trump said Ukraine started it, he was likely referring to the negotiations Ukraine initially started in March 2022, a month after they were invaded, but later passed up on. It seems Putin's supposed peace proposal was what many called a blueprint for the destruction of Ukraine. So Putin isn't the best negotiator. If only he had someone to talk to that could teach him the art of the deal. This was back when Russia was fumbling after Ukraine had just repelled its initial push into Kiev and before Ukraine suffered 3 years' worth of intense casualties. Trump's comments about Zelenskyy with Brian Kilmeade backs up that this is actually what he was talking about.
So I've been watching for years, and I've been watching him negotiate with no cards. He has no cards. And you get sick of it. You just get sick of it. and I've had it. When Zelenskyy said, he wasn't invited to a meeting, I mean, it wasn't a priority because he did such a bad job in negotiating so far. Number one, you shouldn't have had a war. And if you did, it should have been solved and settled immediately. It could have been.
Mr.
He
President,
would have been talked out of that war so easy. They didn't know how to talk.
Right.
Sounds like Trump was criticizing the lack of initiative for negotiations, though it could have been more clear. Because besides sounding like he blames Zelenskyy for the war starting, it also sounds like he's plugging his book. Both sides could have used it. And was it really necessary to call Zelenskyy a dictator? Well, it's possible Trump said this to convince the Russians that Trump's their best shot at making a good deal, and that they can't expect anything better if they hold out much longer. It could also be that Trump is just trolling Zelenskyy to get him and others in line. Trump loves trolling. Was it necessary to call Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas? Yes. Moving on. Trump might be putting pressure on Zelenskyy because he hasn't held elections. Is that a necessary move during wartime, or did Zelenskyy cross the line? You decide. But Trump is definitely telegraphing to Zelenskyy that this is not the Biden administration, in case anyone was still confused. I don't think Trump was happy about Zelenskyy rejecting the rare earth mineral agreement, especially after all the aid the U.S. has given Ukraine. And there's lots of debate on even how much that is. I totally get Zelenskyy wanting to continue the fight with Russia with the hope of retaking all of what Russia took. But there's only so many resources available, not to mention diminishing manpower even with continued Western aid. Russia, meanwhile, continues to have massive casualties, but is able to make up for it with its much larger wartime manufacturing base, economy, and population that Putin is much more than willing to keep throwing into the meat grinder. Some of you may die, but that's a sacrifice he's willing to make. And that's not to mention tons of aid from China that continues to get away with it despite empty threats from the Biden administration about sanctions. And heck, Europe is still dependent on Russian energy. And Europe is focusing more on funding its social welfare programs than on building up military defense. They're more than happy to let the US foot the bill. Basically, the US and Europe have not really taken ending the war in Ukraine seriously. That's why former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson believes Trump's statements are not intended to be historically accurate, but to shock Europeans into action. And I guess it has to be Trump, because when has Germany ever shocked Europe into action? Except those 2 times. Johnson also points out that the U.S. can see $300 billion of frozen Russian assets, mainly in Belgium. This is cash that could and should be used to pay Ukraine and compensate the U.S. for its support. Why is Europe preventing the unfreezing of Putin's cash? The U.S. believes Belgium, France, and other countries are blocking it. So why hold off from seizing all those Russian assets for leverage? It's not like there hasn't been any precedents for seizing assets from war aggressors. After Saddam Hussein's Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait, some of Iraq's frozen assets were used to compensate Kuwait for damages. So why not do something similar with Russian assets? Trump inherited a huge mess he probably wished he didn't have to deal with, which puts him in a bind. He could keep increasing aid to Ukraine, but that would upset a huge chunk of his MAGA base and drain resources for more pressing matters like countering China. At the same time, it's not like he wants to be Joe Biden and have another Afghanistan disaster, though receiving a thank you fruit basket from the Taliban for all those weapons they left behind that helped them take over might have been nice. The war in Ukraine might end up being like the Russia-Finnish Winter War of 1939 to 1940. Much like Putin, Joseph Stalin was convinced a much smaller nation like Finland would fold to the full might of the Soviet Union. Finland fought back hard and gave us badass Finnish legends like this guy. I bet his catchphrase right before he killed someone was, "You're finished." But despite all their badassery, overwhelming Russian numbers eventually whittled the Finns down. There was a very real chance that Finland could lose. Instead, Finnish Field Marshal Karl Mannerheim insisted on peace. In return for some territory Stalin wanted, Finland kept its autonomy. Sometimes you have to gain victory through not fighting. Although since I've heard Trump isn't a big fan of reading, maybe he didn't learn that from history as much as the most recent season of Cobra Kai. Spoilers. If Zelenskyy followed Finland's path, he'd likely have to give up the Donbas and Crimea. But it might save the rest of Ukraine. That, unfortunately, might be the most realistic outcome that Ukraine has left. Only time will tell if this works or if they'll continue to have a falling out, figuratively. So what do you think? Leave your comments below with your expertly devised peace plan for Ukraine, because I think everyone is scrambling for ideas. And if you're willing to give aid, though, please help me survive by supplying me with coffee. Subscribe to our new premium website, AmericaUncovered.tv. Just click on the button that's been on the screen. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thank you for watching America Uncovered.